Could you tell us a little bit more about how you kind of went all in into this first principles thinking, making insurance not just suck anymore, but making insurance sexy again?
So a couple of things. One is nothing is all that complicated. You know, when you're standing at the outside of an industry like insurance, people make it sound incredibly complicated. And it has its own terms that you've never heard of, and a loss ratio and a combined ratio and all different actuarial terms, and you don't even know what an actuary is. And then they tell you it's very capital intensive and that nobody understands the financials, and that only Warren Buffett can invest in insurance because it's so complex, and all these kinds of things. And I came, as I mentioned, I'd been a lawyer, and it was funny to see there how lawyers get trained to use Latin terms for stuff that you could say in plain English. But if you say in plain English, then anybody can understand it. If you say mens rea, then it's a Latin term, and now it's, oh, you know, only lawyers can use it. And you create these guilds where you try and keep everybody else out and create the halo of how complicated it is. Insurance is not complicated. I'll say at first approximation, nothing is complicated. It's just stuff that you don't know right now. But I think as an entrepreneur, if you have a head on your shoulders and you're curious about things, you can pick up the basics, the fundamentals that you need pretty quickly. And a CEO or founder is never going to know everything that they need to know about their business. They're always going to need teams of people. Having started life as a CEO in my 20s, I always realized that I'm only going to succeed by hiring people who are much better, have much greater domain expertise and talents in their field than I have. And it was never my aspiration to be better at anything in the company than the people who I surrounded myself with. So I guess the first thing I'd say is insurance turns out not to be that scary. Nothing is all that scary. If you're not literally, I don't know, I guess some things are that scary. But I would say don't be put off. If you find an industry that you think is interesting and has opportunity and looks like it's lacking innovation, that's all one needs. Again, at first approximation. The second thing, I mentioned my age earlier. So I was a few years younger when we founded Lemonade, but both Shai and I were well into our 40s. And that mattered because we wanted to pick an industry and a business model and a way of doing things that we thought we might be able to pull off, but that not everybody would. And so we formed Lemonade. Not only did we go into insurance, but we established our own insurance carrier, and we did it in New York, which is a particularly exacting regulatory environment. And it requires a lot of capital, and it requires that you can pass muster with very tough regulators. It requires reinsurance. It requires a lot of things that my 20-year-old self would just never be able to pull off. And we were worried about our 20-year-old selves because the world is full of smart young people. And therefore, we decided to tackle this in a way that we thought was incredibly difficult to do. We might just be able to do it. But if we can clear that hurdle, it means that a lot of other people won't, just because we've been doing this for 20 years and a lot of people are just coming out of college and doing their own thing. So I guess what I would say is it's also important to right size, to do something that you think is taps into your strengths, your peculiarities, your things that you know how to do. We raised a $13 million seed round. Sequoia co-led that investment. It was the largest round in Sequoia's history. I couldn't have done that 10 years earlier, let alone 20 years earlier. So again, it's about creating a strategy that is suited to you rather than just what the market needs. Specifically, I'm sorry, I'm rabbiting on here a bit, but specifically in terms of Lemonade, we found the root cause of all evil, and it's a simplification, but simplifications are important, to be a conflict of interest in the insurance industry. So you make a claim from your insurance company. If they pay you, you're richer, they're poorer. So at first, again, approximation, you're fighting over the same coin. That leads to a great deal of distrust. Before founding the company, I reached out to some really prominent thinkers. I managed to get to a Nobel laureate in game theory and another one in behavioral economics, and just try to think this through from a game theory perspective. What is it? How would you build this game differently? Assuming people aren't the problem, it's not the players, it's the game. How would you restructure things? And we came up with this notion of an insurance company that was much less conflicted with its customers, where it took a flat fee rather than pocketing money that's left over at the end of the year, where money that is left over goes to a charity of our customers' choosing, and that motivates them to be good and less incentivized to defraud their insurance company, because they're not sticking it to the man. They're not sticking it to the nameless, faceless behemoth with whom they have a conflicted relationship. They'd be hurting the soup kitchen that they volunteer at on Sundays, or the local church, or the kids' school, or whatever charity they're designated. So a lot of moving parts going back to basics. The only way to bring that about was to establish our own insurance company, which is what we did. Then you build amazing technology, get to pay claims really quickly, do everything else. But those were the kind of initial fundamental founding principles that we put in place.